Greeting, everyone. Welcome to the Black Doctoral Network's weekly web series, Conversation Starters. I am your moderator, Dr. Sharon H. Porter. I'm excited that you have joined us this evening as we talk about the evolution of K-12 education during the COVID-19 pandemic. To start this conversation, I have amazing educators that have joined us this evening. First, we have Dr. Stanley Harris. He serves as a director of professional learning with Digital Promise. He has more than 20 years of combined experience in business, technology, and education with learning the alignment of technology, implementations with the organizational initiatives. He has career experiences as a researcher, an entrepreneur, management consultant, project manager, middle school special education teacher, covering all subjects, and as an assistant lecturer in a graduate teacher preparation program. Dr. Harris' doctoral research examined the professional learning practices involved in innovative technology implementation during COVID 19. Dr. Harris earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in marketing from Morehouse College, an MBA and MSIS in information systems from the University of Maryland, College Park, an MSED in education from Hunter College, and an EDD in educational leadership from the University of California, Los Angeles. He is passionate about using innovative technology to enhance learning and empower individuals to produce a systemic change in the education sector. Now we go to Dr. Tiffany S. Aaron. She holds a PhD in educational administration and policy from the University of Georgia. Her research focuses on gender and race in leadership for school turnaround, leadership for sustained improvement, transformative leadership, moral leadership, and equity in education. Her most recent research explores the perspectives and practices of successful Black women urban elementary principals who turned around underperforming schools. She has published works in the Journal of School Leadership and the Qualitative Report. Dr. Aaron is a member of the American Educational Research Association and the University Council for Education Administration. She is an alumnus of UCEA's Jackson's Scholars Network. Formerly a K-12 educator, she is currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Virginia. And next, we are excited to welcome Dr. Kimberly West. She is a proud educator, educational consultant, and the founder of Investing in the Middle Center for Educational Change. IMCEC is a nonprofit organization that focus on providing educational support and resources for disadvantaged middle school students. Dr. West has more than 10 years of experience as a middle school educator. She holds a PhD in educational administration and policy from the University of Georgia, an education specialist with an emphasis in curriculum and instruction from Piedmont College, a Master of Arts in Middle School Childhood Education from Otterbein University, and a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration with a marketing focus from Otterbein University. Dr. West also holds certifications in educational leadership and teaching in numerous K-12 fields. Her research interests include policy implementation in the classroom and teachers' sense making of education policy as demonstrated by their instructional practice. Welcome to each of you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We are excited to talk on this topic of COVID 19. As a K 12 educator and principal, it has truly impacted, and we're here to dive in a little deeper. So, I'm going to start with my first question. And Dr. West, I'm going to ask you to start with your response. How has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted K-12 education?
Well, in all honesty, I would say we don't have enough time to talk about that. We need a whole lot more time, right? Because there have been changes in numerous ways, right? Changes to instruction and how teachers deliver instruction, the methods, whether they are teaching in a hybrid setting or teaching strictly online. There are changes to how leaders lead teachers during this time, in how they even view the work that they do. And then mostly, I think this pandemic has revealed to us the inequities in education, the things that we knew were already there, but it has really shown the difficulties that students of color, our disadvantaged students, our English language learners, our students with disabilities, the challenges that they experience in obtaining a equitable education. So that has been something that has been truly brought to the forefront. And then even access to technology, and using technology as a tool and a resource is something that has truly, truly impacted our K-12 system. Again, even in light of this instructional things, but just the need for teachers and educators to practice self-care, right? So teachers have been taught that you are on the line, you are a sacrificial lamb, and you are there for the children. But at the same time, though, it is truly revealed that there is this time that we need to also put things aside and take care of us.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. As we just welcomed in my school our teachers back this week from a year ago.
Mm.
And self-care is definitely on the forefront. Absolutely. And Dr. Harris, I'm going to go to you next with that same question. How has COVID-19 impacted K-12 education from your experience?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's previously been said, and I'll also add, I think that there's a new appreciation for teachers now, with the students being home all day and having the parents having to supplement the teaching that's happening. So they're starting to see some things that their teacher might have said about their student that they were like, no, that's not my baby. But now they can see it for themselves. So I think that that's a pro, in which that's also caused the parent teacher communication to increase. So I think that's definitely a pro. I think some of the cons have, what was stated is like, it's not only good to have the technology readily available, but the teachers have to be trained in how to use it effectively in order to teach the children. And you also have to take into mind the technology not only in the schools but also at the students' homes. Because it's not good enough just to give them a computer and say, okay, you're good, but they also have to have connectivity at home so that they can actually complete that. So that's sort of like the homework gap. It's not good enough just to have the close the digital divide, which is providing access to the students, but it's also providing them with the means to complete their academic instruction at home using the technology. So that involves not only training with the teachers, but it also involves making sure that at home that they have the ability to complete the work.
You are absolutely correct. I cannot imagine so many parent universities that blossom during this pandemic, because not only did we have to service the students, we had to service the parents as well. So you are exactly correct. And so, Dr. Aaron, what's your take on your experience of the effects of COVID-19?
Yes, well, first of all, I would like to just say that I agree with what was mentioned previously. Another aspect of this pandemic has been the disenfranchisement of millions of students across our country. Dr. West spoke about the student sex, or the subsets of students um, who have been impacted the most by the COVID-19 pandemic: students of color, marginalized students. Also want to add to that students who are migrant students, students who are home insecure, who don't have a roof over their head, that they have that stability. And they have been just disconnected from our education system because of the inequalities that pre-existed before COVID even hit our country.
Thank you for that. And so the next question is, what are some ways that the K-12 educational sector has evolved during COVID-19 pandemic? And we touched a little bit about that, especially with the technology. I, for one, our district was not one-to-one, and we had to get that way very quickly. So I'm going to go to Dr. Harris first. How have we evolved?
Yes, well, my dissertation was actually on implementing innovative technology in K through 12 public schools during COVID-19. So it was and it actually changed because of COVID-19 because it hit in the middle of my dissertation. So I have personal experience with that. So one thing that I did study was the impact of teacher preparation and professional development for teachers. So that's some way that it's evolved in that this crisis was a catalyst for the understanding that teachers have to be familiar with technology at this point in time. It's ubiquitous in our society. They have to get comfortable with it because before teachers were either go, slow, or no when it came to technology. Now everyone is you have to be either a go or at the very least a slow. Because there's no other way to provide services to the students. So I think that it really shined a light on the professional development that was necessary. Because in my study, I looked at over 10,000 respondents, and 88% of them said that they felt more confident with using technology after they went through professional development.
Absolutely. I love it. Dr. West, what's your take on the evolution of K-12 education during this pandemic?
Thinking about this question, I don't think it's necessarily an evolution. I know there was a lot of conversation in the policy realm about what changes could occur during this time, right? So how can we reimagine education? Other than technology, other than, as Dr. Harris has said, that getting on board, I think there's been a struggle to evolve. I think there has been a struggle to make changes because at one point, it's as someone had said, I heard someone previously say, we're flying the plane as we're going, right? We're flying the plane as we're on it. And we're quickly adapting to things that are going on. And so I think that while some people had really great hopes and dreams of reimagining and evolving and changing education, especially thinking about educational equity, I think those were really admirable desires, but do I see a lot of evolution or change, especially for the good? I don't know. I still have to, sit back and think about that and even just watch what's going on in the field.
So the jury's still out for you.
The jury is still out for me. And that's being honest, yes.
Right. Okay. Dr. Aaron, what's your experience on how education has evolved?
Simply to Dr. West, I do agree that there has been a lot of talk about how we can evolve, but I don't think much progress has been made. I think this pandemic has brought on a lot of awareness when it comes to the social emotional learning needs of students, as well as teachers, going back to that mental health piece and really working on our self-care as well. I think acknowledging that we all, not only educators, but also students, are going through this period of isolation from peers, not being able to interact, even with those stable teachers in that day-to-day interactions face to face, that there are a lot of side effects to that in regards to mental health, where it's depression and things of that nature, anxiety that has been on the rise when it comes to students, and not even high school students, but also elementary and middle school students. And so I think bringing that to the forefront of education has been something that is an area for us to explore going forward and providing those necessary supports.
Thank you for that. And so let's go on, because this is probably one of the hottest topics in education right now. Do you think that the hybrid and remote learning systems that hasn't been beneficial towards academic achievement? This is the $1 million question. I just want you all to know. Dr. West, I'm going to start with you.
Woo! All right. Do you really want the answers? No. So thinking about this, as a person who has engaged in this practice and who engages in this practice on a daily basis, I think of hybrid learning sometimes as to kind of give you a visual, if you've ever seen like a cartoon with an octopus and their hands are going in a million different directions and they're trying to grab for one thing, and they try and grab for another, and gets to stop the child from dropping this, it is, I will say this, it is an admirable learning style. But if you value the work of teachers, if you value their social emotional well-being, if you value their work, this is a strain on teachers. I will also say it's also a strain on students because you have now taken away, in a sense, differentiated learning in multiple ways in which students can learn, and said, this is the only way you're going to learn. And that's on the computer. And so, and yes, I do realize the challenges of the pandemic. I do realize your space, my space, 6 feet apart, that is required during this time. But it is a challenge because it takes away from those students who need paper. Because in my experience, the students who are in the classroom are engaged in the same learning practices as the students who are at home. And in all honesty, that is for the sanity of the teacher. Now, I have seen instances where teachers do use or do attempt to do things different for their students who are in class versus their students who are online. But I will tell you that is double duty, that is double work, and it is a challenge. And so as far as towards academic achievement, I would say it's difficult. And I would not necessarily say it's beneficial because also in my experience and in observation of others, you have taken the curriculum and you have broken it down in such a way that sometimes you have to ask yourself, what do I really have to make sure that you learn? Because time is of the effort, the attention span of the students is minimal. And so can students learn in a hybrid setting? Absolutely. My students have learned. Other students in other schools and other teachers, friends that I talk to, their students have learned. But is it helpful in doing remediation? Is it helpful in grabbing those students? Is it helpful in helping those students to catch up? Because let's be honest, when we shut down a year ago, there was some lost learning there. So the learning loss is just extended. And so has it been beneficial? In some regards, yes, students still can learn, but it is a challenge and it is difficult. Because students, and one more thing I'll add is that in this learning environment, the things that we do with students, organizational skills, time management skills, making sure you write your homework in your agenda, making sure you know where that test is next week, those things have been lost. And so students are not only experiencing learning challenges with academics, but also in those skills that they need to help them be successful students.
Absolutely. And to your point, and I know in my school district, we've totally taken that off the table. They've not been scored in that for a year now. So you're absolutely correct. Dr. Harris.
Yes, I would agree with everything that was said. And I would also add that in some cases, I'm gonna go towards I'm going to give an example of how it could be beneficial. So there's been some special needs students that were having problems with organizing, with being on time, with having check marks and all that. But now, since we've gone to remote hybrid version, it's digital. It's pretty much been laid out for them. The structure's been laid out for them. They can check, like, where am I missing homeworks? And they can go through and they can check using, like, for instance, in Google Classroom. You can see which ones you've missed. You can see which ones you've completed. So it lays out for them, although they're not doing it themselves, not like as was mentioned, but at least it's supplemented some of their learning to help some of those children that have been organizationally challenged, so to speak, to be more organized and have their parents be able to find things and help them as well. So I think in that way, if I want to look at the brighter side, that would be a brighter side. But then, as was mentioned before, it's very challenging for the teachers to provide instruction and to have that paradigm shift in thinking and in pedagogy. That's like their beliefs in how they believe teaching should happen, and align that with technology, which has been very problematic historically speaking. So I think although there have been some challenges, I think there are some silver linings that should be taken forward. And we should learn from that and incorporate the positives going forward.
I like that angle, Dr. Harris. Dr. Aaron, what is your take on hybrid and remote learning?
Yes. Well, living in the age in which we live, online learning is becoming rapid across the country and across the world. There's no institution where there's not some type of form of online learning. Here in the state in which I live, part of the high school requirement is that you have to take one online course to graduate. And so there are pluses and minuses to hybrid learning and remote learning. I agree with everything that's been stated, both the positive and some of the challenges associated with online learning. But there's one thing that really just sticks out in my mind, and it kind of ties back to what we discussed before. I believe that there have been benefits for remote learning, especially for those who have access to devices to do the learning, but also to those who not only had the access to the devices and internet, but those who had teachers who were prepared to teach online. So all of these things are interconnected, because if you do not have a teacher who's not prepared to come to teach online, then there's going to be additional learning loss. But they do have the services provided so that students can interact with teachers and interact with their peers during this time of quarantine.
And I want to circle back to something Dr. West mentioned, that the hybrid instruction, at least in my school district, is absolutely the same as the distant learning. It truly is. The students are just in a classroom on the computer, looking at the teacher who's right in front of them, but looking through the computer. And so it argues, is that really beneficial? So we'll see. I think that we'll have lasting effects of this whole pandemic. We know that we will. So we will definitely see it further. So let's go on to the next question. How important is academic leadership in effectively managing the adverse effects of the current pandemic? Dr. Aaron.
I would like to say that leadership is essential when it comes to managing the effects of the pandemic. When we're talking specifically about the principal role in itself, the principal provides vision for the school. They manage people, they develop people, they build capacity in teachers. And one of the essential functions of a school leader is to keep a pulse on their community. In schools, principals and teachers know the day-to-day needs of their students. And so therefore, they're more aware and cognizant of the needs of their students. They have abilities to partner with even community organizations to provide some of the resources there in the community to help their students. In this new era where we're transitioning, back to brick and mortar or face-to-face school, there's a lot of challenges that will be present in that time as well, as students adjust from going, from online back to the building. And I think that one of the essential functions for the principal is helping to mitigate some of those challenges, especially with coordinating and have a communication pieces between the teachers and the parents or the community at large, and bridging the gaps that are present between communication, not only between parents and teachers, but also teachers and district administration, because that's a big piece as well. Dr. West and myself were actually working on a project where we're researching the perceptions of teachers and their practices and their experiences during this COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the things that has been coming reoccurring in our findings is that teacher voice has been missing from a lot of the decision making that has been happening during this time. And so leaders have the opportunity to step in and really advocate not only for their students, but also for their teachers during this time, and really bringing their voices to the forefront when it comes to the decision making process during this time.
Dr. Aaron, I would love to expand on that point that you made about, the leader needing to know the pulse, being very cognizant of what's going on in the building. And that is absolutely correct. One of the pluses for me in my school district is our superintendent has deemed the principal not only as the principal, but the COO, the Chief Operating Officer. And that's really so that you can be innovative, because you know your community. You know what's best for your community.
Absolutely.
And having that teacher voice is imperative. Imperative. So I thank you for bringing that point to the light. Dr. West, your take.
I agree with everything Dr. Aaron said. And to add to that, the importance of this academic leadership, there have been a lot of changes during this time, changes to how grading should happen. grading expectations, instructional expectations. And so the role of the leader has, in my opinion, expanded greatly because they have now had to quickly on the fly make decisions. What are best practices to ensure that students, are completing their work and that they're learning and that they're engaged and that they're attending school, whether online or face to face. And so that role has greatly changed because they've had to say, what can we do now? What do we need to do within our building, within our space, within our community to make these changes necessary for the successful education of our students? But not just that. Teachers are looking for, or were looking for, and I can speak for myself at the time, for someone to just say, guess what? It's okay. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't always know, things that, in education, there's some traditions, right? We know kind of what happens each month of the year in a sense. We have some things we know what's the traditional things in March, such as we're getting ramped up for state testing. April state testing comes, the end of the year. So we're used to an ebb and flow of school. But in this period, it was important for leaders to just step up and say, hey guys, it's okay that I don't know. It's okay that you don't know. We're in this together. And to kind of nurture teachers and nurture them, because teachers are extending themselves to their students and they needed someone to extend it, something to them. And so that leadership, that letting people know that it's okay to, be yourself, to feel uncomfortable, to stretch yourself, all those things are important to ensuring that we can still educate students during this time, even if we don't know everything that's going to happen, or the things we expect to happen may not happen as we know they would previously.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I pride myself on this year is showing that vulnerability. I don't have all the answers, but we collectively can bring ourselves together and come up with the best solution for us. And that goes back to Dr. Aaron with that teacher voice, bringing them in to that decision-making process. So thank you, Dr. West. Dr. Harris, your take.
Yeah, so I think obviously I agree with everything that's been said. This is a very good group. So I would also add that the leaders have now had to really manage that relationship between people, processes, and technology. I call that the trifecta because you might have processes in place, but since it's been disrupted by COVID-19 and we've had to implement technology, some of those processes have had to be adjusted to incorporate technology. So you also have to deal with the people aspect, and that's the culture of the schools. You have to take that into account because culture is something that's very, very hard to change and influence. So leaders have to, as was said before, be aware of that pulse and know what teachers are the go, no, and slow, and how to, for instance, know like when I was trying to implement technology in school, I would try and pick out the teacher that was the no. Convince that teacher that is the no, and that teacher will be my champion. That teacher was my champion when I did it. So if that person could accept it, everyone else would be on board because that's normally the person who's been there the longest, who's one of the most respected people. And so when you're able to leverage that, then you can effectively have your vision come to fruition. If you're a leader and you're trying to combine those elements of people, processes, and technology in order to, enhance academic achievement in these times.
Dr. Harris, identifying the players is number one. You have to know exactly. So identifying who those influencers are important. Thank you for that. So the next question is, what disparities have you witnessed as a result of this pandemic that impacts African American students in the K-12 sector? And let's start with you, Dr. Aaron.
Oh, okay. We can have this could be its own topic right here for a whole hour for a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start by saying this. Systemic racism is the precondition that has allowed COVID to disproportionately impact students of color and more in specific African American students in the K-12 education. Underinvestments in African American communities have led to Black children attending schools that have fewer resources with less technology and supports for digital learning. Um, if you're thinking about this at a macro level, if we're thinking about the health impacts of being in an African American community where COVID has come in and the number of hospitalizations for Black and Brown communities has been higher or disproportionate compared to those in the majority, we're looking at for a limited access to affordable health care, right? So a lot of students of color live in what they call food deserts, right? So that has also added to the impact of them being able to attend or not able to attend school because they have that food insecurity. We're thinking about the communities, even living in areas where there's environmental toxins and things of that nature. The majority of frontline workers, they say, are people of color. So even thinking about occupational segregation and what that has meant to students who are Black or African American, right? Having someone, a loved one, someone in your home who's on the front line, who is exposed to COVID, that could lead to stress in children, even thinking about, okay, so is my parent or my grandmother or my aunt or someone close to me going to be exposed to COVID and what that does on them, and thinking about this stress, right? In this education sector, and how is that going to impact them when they're sitting down at a computer trying to engage in learning with a teacher with all of these other things running through their mind. In addition, looking at the effect or the impact this COVID epidemic has had on unemployment in the African American community and what that means for K-12 students of color in their families, how that's impacting the ways in which they can even engage in schooling. If you compound that with even, the previous years, and more specifically the last 2 years, even though this has existed way before, but the spotlight has been on the past 2 years, compounding this with the whole racial trauma that has happened with the unarmed shooting of Black people in this nation. So you have that one trauma and then this pandemic combined together, and that leads to impacting students in our classrooms or digital classrooms. And so COVID has greatly impacted the education of African American students and really highlighted or really even exacerbated those opportunity gaps and disparities that they experience.
Thank you for that. Dr. Harris.
Yes, I would agree with what was just said. And I would also say that it really showed the differences in resources in particular schools and where the schools might be located and what resources are available to schools based on the parental involvement. Because, like, for instance, my son goes to a school where the parents are exceedingly involved. They're there, they have a booster club. It's everywhere. You always hear about the booster club every single week. They raise a lot of money. But and then when COVID hit and it came time to distribute resources such as Chromebooks and hotspots, there was no problem at my school. It was like very seamless. But then when I've talked to other parents, there are some very, very serious disparities in terms of students not having Chromebooks, not having access, internet access. Yeah, internet access wasn't there. So really, as was said, it really shed some light on some of the disparities between the schools and looking at how the schools are funded, which would hopefully, spar some interesting discussions on the funding of schools and that whole formula so that more schools so there'll be equitable access to resources so that every student has an equitable chance to succeed academically.
Thank you. Dr. West.
Yes, I agree with both the comments from Dr. Aaron, who so eloquently put, and described some of the inequities that pre-existed in our community, as well as Dr. Harris. And I will just take it a step further and say that COVID didn't expose these things, but I would say amplify these things, such as teacher quality. What is the quality of teachers that are teaching our African American students, particularly in urban schools, which research has previously said that these are teachers who are less experienced. And so where you have less experienced teachers, you have less of a chance or not as much rich opportunity to have teachers who can make quick adjustments, who are knowledgeable in pedagogy, who are immersed and engrossed in the content, that they can make those shifts to continue to build and grow our students. I would also say it also amplified the disparities within our curriculum. Our curriculum is very narrow. And so one of the things that has been highlighted during this time is the need to bring a more diverse, rich curriculum to our students. History is mainly taught from the perspective, for example, of white Americans. And so there's a need for there to be diversity in that curriculum, but not just within the history, but also in mathematics, also in reading language arts, the books you read, also in sciences. Let our students see themselves in our curriculum. That is important because that too is a way to hook them and to get them engaged in their learning when they can see themselves in the curriculum. And as Dr. Harris noted, just the parent involvement, the parent engagement. One of the things I know that I have learned, and even thinking about the work of my nonprofit, is how do we engage parents? We don't think about this. You know, when you're a parent, when your child is born, the joke is always, you don't have a book, right? There's no book that says this is what you do. That's the same thing with being a parent of a child in school. Our parents need to be trained and taught. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but they need to be shown this is how you engage with your child's teacher. This is the questions and the type of questions you can ask. And guess what? It's okay to ask those types of questions because this is your child and you want the best from them. And so in a sense, I don't think that these are new problems. I think these are problems that have been amplified by this pandemic. And there are possibilities for greatness and things that we can do to make education better. And so going kind of back to that question, when you ask about, has there been an evolution? I don't see the evolution, but I see great change and I see great possibilities of things that can come and make our educational system better for all students.
And, and I would just add on to that, Dr. West, it would be unfortunate if we do not come out better on the other side of this pandemic because the lessons are there. Mm-hmm. We just have to adhere to those. So thank you for that. Dr. Harris, I'm going to start with you with this next question. How significant are collaborations between academic leadership, local organizations, and other stakeholders in addressing pandemic-related changes to the academic landscape?
Yeah, I think during this crisis, we've seen a lot of organizations step up and provide services to schools, such as like Verizon provided hotspots to a lot of schools so that students could get internet access. And I think a lot of schools, actually a lot of organizations provided food to schools so that they could feed some of the students that were there. So I think there was a lot of coming together and community building as a result of this, or just either there was community building from scratch, or it just enhanced the community building that had already been started and been taking place in those particular environments. And I think that it really showed how there needs to be more collaboration between all these different stakeholders in the community when it comes to the school. Like the businesses need to get involved so that the students would have access to technology that they could then use as a part of their career or increase the STEM academic achievement in the students. Because now that students are at home, like for instance, they need to learn how to keyboard. They need to learn how to type. This typing like this isn't going to work after a certain level, because when you're starting to write essays, as we know, after writing dissertations, typing like this, you never have finished your dissertation in time. So I mean, there's certain skills that that the collaboration will build forth, and having that communication between those different organizations will bring forth those certain skills and some of the needs that can be used to enhance our students.
Wow. And I've got to say, we just this week talked about keyboarding in my school, and my counselor actually volunteered to take that on. And so you are exactly correct in saying that. Thank you. Dr. Aaron.
Yes, it is essential that schools learn to partner with their local community organizations. There is such an abundance of resources in the community that schools and school leaders can tap into to provide resources for their students. When businesses invest in schools, they're really investing in students, they're investing in the community, and they're investing in future citizens that can participate in the community and help expand and grow their local communities and give back to those same organizations that invested in them. And so I believe that it is critical and essential that school leaders learn to partner with local communities. I'm in contact with several principals, and they have really relied on organizations in their community to help provide for students and families during this time. One principal in particular has provided with a church organization who has allowed families from the school to come and even wash their clothes during this time who didn't have access to a laundromat or things of that nature, providing food and meals to families during this time where they're a little food insecure. And so I definitely think that it's critical to the landscape of education is really learning to access and make those partnerships in the community.
Thank you. Dr. West.
Oh, I agree. And it is extremely important for a number of reasons, especially during this particular time. And one reason why that connection and collaboration between other stakeholders, others within the community, is that unfortunately during this time, we've had a lot of students who have, I don't want to say fallen off, but they're not engaged, right? And so their attendance is non-existent. We have students who are on the rolls, right, who are enrolled in our schools, but are not present. They're not logging in. They're not making contact. Personnel within the school, teachers, counselors, principals, assistant principals have attempted to contact families. And so having those relationships with others to reach out to families and say, what do you need during this time? How can we assist you? Has been crucial, especially in engaging and finding those students, knocking on doors, saying, hey, I'm concerned. What's going on and what can I do to help? Has been extremely important during this time period as we attempt to, not just find students or, not just have students in school for the sake of having students in school, but for also making sure that they are socially, emotionally well. And that has been something that has been challenging for a lot of students. The ones at home who may feel lonely, who may feel as though they're not a part, and who are missing those connections with their peers. And so having those relationships with other outside organizations and other stakeholders has been vital in making sure that we keep our kids connected and our families connected.
Thank you for that. So what are some ways that we can continue to address the changes in K-12 education to foster better transitions for students and parents during the pandemic? And let's go with you, Dr. Aaron.
Sure. So first thing, when I think about this question, the idea of teacher-parent relationships come up in my mind. But really, I think during this time of COVID, it's transitioned from a relationship to a partnership where schools and parents really need to engage in together for the benefit of their student. I think providing resources for parents during this time to help their students when it comes to this online learning, the digital learning, and helping them through the content and the curriculum would be beneficial to students in the long run, making that shift. Another thing that has come up, and we keep talking about the evolution of education, I think that we need to think about it that way as a changing system. But so many people keep talking about, oh, can't wait to get back to, what we used to be, right? Can't wait to get back to, the regular days. And what we need to realize is that the status quo was not working, right? So we've recognized through this pandemic that because the status quo was already not working, was not serving many of our students, we need to really think about how we can respond to the individual needs of our students, right? Because education, yes, it is a communicative process, a community process, but it's also an individual process that teachers and students engage in. And so providing those supports for students who are impaired, whether that's visually or or hearing impaired or even physically challenged, really working on those emotional, social supports when it comes to parents and families and tying those together and really building relationships in meaningful ways. I think so many times in many communities, there's a disconnect between parents and teachers. Maybe because, parents themselves had their own experiences when they were in K-12 education that really impacted the ways in which they engage with their own students, teachers. And so really working to build relationships, to build partnerships with parents and bring them into, this environment of schooling and really changing what that looks like. Not just, oh, well, let's come and have, the school open house night and you come to us, but really opening the school, going out into the community, having educators go out into the community and really engage parents, engage them in this process of really getting to know them and build relationships with them to foster the education for their students.
Thank you. Dr. Harris.
Yes, I think that communication strategy, especially during a crisis, has been very essential during this time. Like for instance, when COVID first hit, we started going on Zoom or whatever video platform that we had, and then we started having parent-teacher conferences or parent or town halls, and things of that nature. And one thing that we noticed was that there was a spike in attendance because parents could actually attend them, that they didn't have to drive in traffic to get to the school in order to attend a town hall or some type of event that was going on at the school in which they were giving information. And then even if they didn't make it, in some cases there are recordings. Like for instance, the superintendent of LUSD comes on every Monday on the dot. And then if you don't catch them, then they rebroadcast it during later on in the day, and then you can see it throughout the week. So I think the ability to reach more parents that in to their convenience is something that should be carried on, because that communication is essential. So that, like now a lot of parents are like, well, I don't know. Well, it's on the website. You can see the video. They give you the robocalls too. They send you an email. They send you a text. So it's like, if you can't reach somebody by text, email, phone, video, I don't know, maybe telepathy, we need to work on that or something. But I mean, they've really gone to great lengths to really expand the ways in which they can reach out and communicate with parents. And that should be something that should be carried forward.
I wholeheartedly agree. And even not even at the district level, but at the school level, we have begun to use, of course, the recordings more often now, which is something we could have done before, but the pandemic thrust us into that. And so that definitely needs to continue on as we make it on the other side of this pandemic. Dr. West.
One of the things in education is we do two things. We have a short memory, or we take something that is pre-existing and we give it a new name. And so one of the things that we definitely need to do from this is honestly just reflect and say what worked and what didn't work. Don't say, hey, it's a new school year, it's time to move on to new things. No, let's honestly sit and reflect. And so when we are able to sit and reflect about what things worked well and what things did not work well, to Dr. Harris's point, continuing to have provide options where students and parents can engage virtually is important, right? And so making sure that we are asking ourselves what works, what doesn't work. For example, I was talking to a special education coordinator, and she said, we're definitely going to keep doing, our IEP meetings and reevaluations via Zoom because it is convenient for parents. And so, again, we also need to, the one thing I could say in engaging with our students and parents and allowing for better transitions is I think that we also need to take, and thinking of Title I schools, right? Thinking of those students, brown and black students, or students in our Title I schools, thinking of ways outside of the box to engage them. And getting outside of those traditional ways. Yes, I know you have to have a curriculum night. Yes, I know there are certain things that are required in the law. But what other ways can we use our funding? What other ways can we use our resources? Can we pull our manpower together to go about, as Dr. Aaron had previously said, about immersing ourselves in this community and bringing our parents into the school and the school into the community, because it has to be both ways. And so I just ask that we really take some time to reflect about what worked and what didn't work, because there are a lot of good things. Even though the pandemic seemed like something that was traumatic, and it was, there are a lot of great opportunities for us to connect and engage with parents and students to continue to foster the growth and development for all students and bring them in, because we need our parents, right? We can't get by without our parents. And we need our parents to be engaged, not just for the sake of engagement, but for the sake of their student, to know that their parent, when students know that their parent is behind them, yes, they're going to put forth their best effort.
They will. Absolutely. And so my final question, actually, if you have experience with the Black Doctoral Network, I want to know, how has the network really enhanced you personally and or professionally? And if you have not as of yet, how do you envision the Doctoral Network really making a difference in you professionally and personally? Dr. West, I'm going to start with you.
So I've had experience attending a few conferences, right? And so I thoroughly enjoy attending the conferences. I enjoy the networking. I enjoy, so I originally joined the network as a graduate student when I was in the beginning stages of my doctoral program. And so to come to a conference, to be able to network with others, to be able to get resources, to get that affirmament as a person of color was something that was really important to me. To know that there were other people out there who shared similar thoughts, similar sentiments, and who I could engage with, who I could go to in confidence to say, hey, can you give me a suggestion? What do you think? And so that has been something that has definitely helped me as I pursued my doctorate degree. And even now, as I engage with other opportunities, whether it's the things that we do that the network does on Clubhouse, to the other things such as the podcast, it has been something that I find beneficial. Just those connections and being able to network with others has been something that's been very valuable to me.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Aaron.
Yes, I agree with everything Dr. West just said. Even thinking about this experience here, having the opportunity to present or to speak in the conversation tonight and really engage with other doctors who are founded or have experience in, the education sector. Definitely the opportunity to network, even going back and listening to, the YouTube videos that are posted on the Black Doctoral Network YouTube page, and really listening and engaging in some of the conversations that are happening about current topics that are related to what's going on in the African American community, especially in the African American doctoral network community, and really thinking and engaging in these ways around these topics has really been beneficial to me, not only personally, but also professionally.
Thank you. Dr. Harris.
Yes, my journey with this organization has just begun. But in the time that I have been affiliated with it, just having conversations with people who talk from a basis of data and being able to, look at the premise of what somebody is saying and then like break that down and then having conversations based on that in this time, in this day and age, is something that that you can't really take for granted, given
Absolutely.
everything that's going on. To have an intelligent conversation when when you're talking about a premise, you're talking about data, and your conversations are built upon that, is something that is golden right now.
Awesome. Well, we welcome you and we are excited, and you are in for a real treat with your affiliation of BDN. And so with that, we want to say thank you for joining us. We want to give out the contact information. We're going to start with Dr. West, then Dr. Aaron, and then Dr. Harris. Dr. West, please share your contact information.
Sure. I can be contacted via email at kwest.phd@gmail.com, or you can contact me via my website, at kimberlywestphd.com.
Thank
So
you.
please connect with me. Please reach out.
Thank you. Dr. Aaron.
Yes, you can connect with me through my email at dr.tiffanyaaron@gmail.com. And please add me to your LinkedIn. Of course, my name is Tiffany Aaron on LinkedIn.
Thank you. And Dr. Harris.
You can reach me at soharris@g.ucla.edu, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Stanley O. Harris.
Thank you. And again, we thank you for joining us. We remind you to like, share, and subscribe. Conversation Starters is here every Friday night at 7 to 8 p.m. That's Eastern Time. We hope to see you next week. Have a great evening.